Welcome everyone to this discussion on public sector's communication conundrum and how to support staff deliver effective services and improve lives whilst overcoming technology silos. I'm Mark Blanchard, I'm the Public Sector Director for GovNewsDirect, and today I'm going to be joined by three expert guests. We have Keith Beech, the Director of Communications at Walsall Council. Keith is a communication specialist with vast experience advising lawmakers and top-level executives on communications. He possesses expertise in the private, public and not-for-profit sector and has a passion for digital engagement methodologies and has considerable media knowledge, which has been gained from experience working as a senior manager and a journalist for the BBC in the UK and overseas. He has a history of managing effective communication operations and leading teams during organisational transformation and has a unique skill set including stakeholder involvement, crisis communications and reputation management. Keith, it's great to have you with us today. Joining Keith, we've got Jenny Baines, Director of Transformation Office at Leeds University. Jenny's was in the education sector implementing policy in schools in her early career before going on to qualify with CIPD and an honours degree in post-14 education and training, where she's established and led training departments and development services in the public sector. She spent 5 years in the technology industry developing the use of data and systems to transform public services and focusing on technology infrastructure to use data to develop patient and citizen services as well. And with a master's degree in change leadership, followed up with project management, program and portfolio management accreditations, Jenny has spent the last 10 years working across local and central government, as well as health and private sector as a business change and leadership consultant. Most recently, Jenny's been an instrumental figure in supporting the government's response to COVID-19, where she's led on developing a cross-government community of practice in smarter working and has written and developed a range of resources to enable workforce transformation and is very much recognised as an expert speaker on this topic. So, Jenny, great to have you with us.
Thank you, Matt. Good to be here.
And finally, we have Niall Carter. Niall is the head of the public sector division at RingCentral, leads their public sector business, a cloud communications company focusing on delivering solutions to help public sector organisations simplify their estate and engage employees and customers to provide better services. And GovNews have been delighted to work with Niall and his team in surveying the public sector and analysing their rapid adoption of innovations in areas like cloud communications. So now, great to have you with us today. So we're here to talk about this survey and our research. We had over 500 participants complete the survey, more than half of which were C-suite directors and senior management level, and 69% of all respondents representing healthcare, local government, and further and higher education organisations. And this whole series of talks has been to examine some of the insight that's come from that research, opinions, real-world experiences, and we're here to talk about some of that today. So in past talks before today, we've looked at and reviewed the differences in the level of success between internal and external communications. We've talked about analytics, reporting and integration into business systems, as well as organisation and sectors' journey to AI and how that's being looked at in the realms of communications, and how important it is to adopt an omni-channel approach to customer engagement. What I want to start with today is to look at how, when stating either fair or poor, 1 in 5 felt that their organisation's communication performance was letting them down and letting down their modern workforce that they've developed over the past few years during and post-COVID. A further 27% thought that their communications performance was actually no longer assisting with new ways of working cultures and smarter working cultures that they've managed to develop in their organisations. So if I can start by asking our panellists, how can improvements to communication channels support modern workforce or even enhance our adoption of smarter working practices? Jenny, I'm going to come to you first, if I may.
Of course. Thank you, Mark. I think that's a really interesting one to start on. And I mean, I think that we really need to be rethinking how people consume information and expect to be engaged across the board, really. I think we are still reliant on a number of channels that we have been over a number of years. And thinking about how we make our communication location and time agnostic so that it can be consumed when is appropriate and when works for individuals, but we use a much broader range of opportunities for how we communicate. And I think we've still got some catching up to do, particularly around smarter working practice and how organisations are changing the way in which they work and what that actually means for how we share, communicate, and most importantly, I think, engage with our people.
Keith, from a local authority perspective, what are your thoughts on improvements to communication channels? We've seen local authorities go through that channel shift approach over many years. Are you feeling now that with regards to a modern workforce and smarter working practices and principles, where can the next level of improvements be made in communication channels?
I think, as Jenny said, we're playing catch up, and what's really positive from my perspective is that internal communications now is really getting the profile and importance given to it that should have been the case for some time. I think many organisations used a traditional set of ways to communicate with their teams, and maybe not just expected that those traditional ways of communicating with teams would continue forever and ever. Well, we all work very differently now than we used to work, and it's now making sure that the communications channels catch up and are fit for purpose. And I think an enormous amount of time has been committed to external communications and making sure that we're engaging with our residents, in my case, and our customers in cases as well. Maybe in the past that same scale and priority hasn't been put to communicating with our colleagues. A tell mentality is no longer, I think, adequate. Just pushing information out there. It's got to be a conversation culture. That's what people expect. They expect to be able to interact with the people that are giving them information. If they're going to engage with it, then it needs to be that conversation rather than just the equivalent to a post that used to be on the notice board in the staff canteen. That's not good enough anymore, and a digital version of that won't work.
Now, what are your experiences? RingCentral obviously has a huge breadth of knowledge in working with dozens, if not more, public sector organisations on a daily basis. Where are you seeing improvements can be made to communication channels, and how's that affecting the modern workforce?
So I think there's an enablement from a technology point of view that we're massively seeing the leap towards. Microsoft Teams is the example, and Jenny touched upon this. I love what you said about we can't be reliant on traditional channels anymore. So from a technology point of view, I think we're starting to see channel shift. Mark, you mentioned omnichannel earlier. We're starting to see digital channels. So from a technology point of view, we're seeing a change, but then also we're seeing the need for a change around culture and around style. And again, Keith, you really nicely summarised this, where you can't do a broadcast, stick a notice on the canteen anymore. It's got to be a lot more interactive. And I think that's really important and not to forget, especially when it comes to things like isolation, with people increasingly working from home or being recruited to work solely from home. You need to think about the technology, the channel shifts that Jenny touched upon. But you also need to think about the culture and therefore style and forum with which you're communicating with your workforce, because that can have really important ramifications around employee happiness, employee effectiveness, welfare, and so on and so forth.
Okay. So when dealing with customers, in terms of external communications, whether those be citizens in Keith's scenario or stakeholders even, you think about the amount of stakeholders local authorities have to communicate with, or students, for yourself, Jenny. 43% of the organisations felt that their communication channels were not good enough at meeting the expectations from those users and those that they serve. Why do you think this is so high, and what measures can be taken to improve communication channels in line with customer or user expectations? Keith, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think I was surprised by that. I think that we're all consumers, we're all publishers now, aren't we? So we can all communicate ourselves. Everybody now, the sort of limitations, the gatekeepers that used to be the news editors in newsrooms, etc., and the communication offices, that they're no longer gatekeepers of what we talk about and the information that we receive. Everybody can do that themselves, and that therefore raises expectations. I think the channels are important, but I also think the way that we use channels. I think there are some organisations now that open up a wide range of different channels, whether it's through social media, through information channels like Teams, etc. But they think that's enough. They think that's the work done. Then they're on that channel. They're on the latest piece of kit. Therefore, tick the box. Whereas actually, that's how we engage through that channel. How we make sure we're maximising it for the audiences that are using that, and putting the user first, putting the audience first is really important to me. Not everybody will use a single channel. Not everybody has ever used a single channel. But if we can break it down and make sure that we know who we're talking to when we're talking to people through a specific channel, and make sure that they're having as good an experience as is possible, then we're using the technology to enable us to reach that person. But we're reaching that person with compelling content, information, and conversations which they want to join in with and engage with. It's not just the tech is really important, but it's got to go hand in hand with the usability and the way that we work on that.
Like you say, it was a really high, statistic, 43%. And I don't know if that's because people are measuring their expectations against Amazon or other organisations that they feel have perhaps mastered that omni-channel digital experience. From your perspective, Jenny, student experience is pretty much top, if not in the top 3 of priorities for universities, especially when it comes to competition and student fees, and these are your customers now. And hearing universities talk about students being their customers, it's to hear that terminology, it's somewhat moved on to what it was maybe this time 10 years ago. What do you think? Why is that statistic so high, 43%? Is it because we compare it to our day-to-day lives in things of Amazon and online banking and how we communicate and consume other products and services? And what do you think from an education perspective? How can you go one step further to improve communication channels?
I think I'm not unsurprised at that statistic. I think that probably does reflect where we are, and I think particularly, we've had a challenge in the public sector to catch up. I think people, students, the workforce, their expectation of availability of different opportunities for communicating and consumption of information is very different to how it was, even 5 years ago. And I think even, I think one of my worries, perhaps on a more on a workforce level, is following the pandemic. We shifted, didn't we, almost overnight to Teams or Zoom or one of the other platforms. And as we've moved to, establishing what our new ways of working are and communicating, I think we're still in that place of how do we ensure that we're providing the right types of communications? Are we clear enough about what our user experience needs to be and how people want to consume our information? I'm not sure that we always take the time to do that effectively. I think we focus on pushing information out through our standard channels or our newly established channels without actually checking whether that communication strategy is having the right impact. I think one of the things that I'd really like to sort of focus in on is doing some of that analytics about the impact of our communications. What works, what doesn't? Are we getting the responses that we expect? If not, why not? We did a really interesting exercise actually in the university, certainly within the transformation function recently, and that was just to find out actually what people's preferences are. How do they want to consume information? How do they want to be communicated and engaged with? And actually the results were quite surprising, insofar as we had some real splits. So I think in terms of preferences, and what that what that told me is that we've really got to think about that omni-channel approach and build that into all our communication activity, so people don't just have one way of accessing information. It has to be in multiple, or they must have multiple opportunities in order to engage and to respond to communications that we want to engage them on.
Was that survey to the workforce as well as the students?
It was directly at the workforce, so
Right,
it was
okay.
targeting the workforce.
Is there plans there to extend that to the students as well in terms of how they want to be communicated from the academic institution itself?
Yeah, so I mean, we have done some work. I mean, our university has around 40,000 students, so it's a fairly, and they are very mixed. So we have
you'll get
we have a number of
different responses. Yeah,
absolutely. We have international students, we have mature students, we have students from all types of backgrounds, so, and I think that just goes to sort of prove really that it isn't a one size fits all. It's really got to be personalised, and people have to be comfortable in how they are given the opportunities to consume and engage with information.
Now, what are Ring doing when it comes to that statistic, 43%, and how are you supporting your customers to obviously improve on that?
So I think the really important point that I'd make on this, and very much echoes Keith and Jenny, is demand's being led by the consumerization of technology. Right? People have an expectation coming into the workforce that they have actually separate apps for different channels of communication. So it might be WhatsApp for your messaging, it might be a video provider for video, it might be something else, SurveyMonkey for surveys. So that expectation of great tools is coming into the workforce. But what that's being met with, and I want to celebrate the move to cloud, because it's really important. But what that's being met with is essentially using a tool in the workforce that's really designed for one thing, but some functionality bolted on. So when we look at, we've got adequate and good, celebrate that. But how do we go from adequate, good to great? And actually, if we're going to meet the expectations driven by the consumer, we need to find tools, practices, approaches, culture around great communication channel shift. So, Jenny talked about omni-channel there. You're just going to frustrate people if you give them a frustratingly average digital channel to communicate with. You're just going to alienate them and frustrate them. So we need to think about great technologies focused on and provided by specialist organizations focused on those communication technologies.
Lots of agreement there, I'm sure. So within the survey, we asked a plethora of questions, and then we asked some open-ended questions or free text, which is very hard to categorize and analyze. But what we asked was our 500 respondents what their 3 main digital communication priorities were for the year ahead. We were able to categorize the majority of those responses in areas like improving communication channels and adoption, which we've just talked about. Cloud migration was very high in that. I'm sure that pleases Niall. Enhancing performance and analytics. Jenny, was a point you made. Increasing automation. Not necessarily, what are the drivers for introducing automation, increasing automation, and how that works, and also improving digital skills, not just for the organization, but it's for its users as well. So in terms of yourself, Keith, what are your 3 main priorities for digital communications? And importantly, what do you plan to do work-wise towards achieving them?
Improving our channels is a priority and a really important priority. We've got a workforce of just under 3,000 people at Walsall Council, some of which are, like me, looking into a screen for a lot of time of their day. They're based in a corporate centre, or they're based at home linking into it from a device like this. Others of them are they're not touching an office or anything like an office at any point during their week. They could be picking up litter from around the borough. They could be out and about supplying our residents with social care or a number of different services. So improving channels to me is making sure that the channels that we have are channels that are effective for the whole of our workforce, for all of the colleagues that we have. So they're fit for purpose for those people that are connected to the corporate centre most often, but they're also relevant and easy to use for those people that may be working 3 or 4 hours a week, those people that are out and about on the road all of the time during the time that they're working for us. So it's accessible to all. And we've not been able to deliver that. Excuse me, because we've not been able to deliver that to any to the levels that I'd hope for. So that's a really big priority to me. I think the digital upskilling that you mentioned there is really important as well. So as I said before, providing the channels that are accessible to all, and then enabling people to have the skills and confidence to be able to use them in the way that they want to use them. Some people will embrace that really quickly, and they have the expectations when they arrive. As Niall was saying earlier, they expect WhatsApp, they accept this, they accept the other. Other people have worked in a very traditional way, and their whole working way of life has been transformed because of the pandemic, and they don't necessarily have had the learning and development to come alongside that. So upskilling people. So when we enable different ways to communicate with them through an improved range of channels, that they can embrace them and make the most of them. I think those for me are the two most important priorities.
Have you managed to map out all the different personas of those types of workers within the authority? Like you say, there's a huge number of those. I read somewhere recently there's something like there can be up to 400 different job roles within a local authority. So how can you map the personas that those job roles are and basically say, look, you're an individual, you're in you're traveling to and from sites, you're this type of worker, this type of persona, and therefore the communication channels are designed for that persona to get the most out of your work in terms of for the council. Have you managed to do that yet?
We've managed to do a lot of that. We've still got some work to do with some pockets of staff, but a lot of that has been engaging with them face to face, engaging with them through the channels that they've been using for a longer period of time, asking them. I think that's really important. Jenny was saying surveying your staff, so asking your staff rather than imposing things upon them, I think is really important. So I would say we're probably 3/4 of the way down that road. We're constantly reviewing it as we're working differently, and that what was the persona for one group of staff 6 months ago may actually change quite significantly as we embed new ways of working. So it's constantly reviewing and refreshing. It's fourth bridge, isn't it? You paint it, get to the other end, and then you start painting it all the way all over again. So yeah, it's talking, and it's importantly listening to the staff, what they're telling us.
Jenny, your 3, I suppose, main digital communication priorities. And I'm interested in what's driving those priorities as well for the university, in terms of is there an equal balance between being a smarter working champion of a university, or is it more in line with we need to increase student satisfaction and expectations? What are your 3 big priorities this year?
It's quite tricky actually, limiting it to 3. I mean, the examples
Go ahead,
that
I can give you 5.
The examples that you mentioned in the sort of framing of the question mark all resonated. I mean, at the university, cloud migration is still one of our key areas. So we are still in the process of moving a number of our key systems to the cloud, and in doing so, increasing resilience and improving security. Those are absolutely priorities for us. I suppose that the one that I'm particularly interested in is around this increasing automation in a university that, particularly one of the Russell Group universities that Leeds is. A number of our systems and processes have not been updated for quite some time, and the legacy of that has been a lot of our roles are involved in far more transactional activity than we would like them to be, and we really want our people in how they work with students to be able to automate a lot of that transactional work so that they can really add value to the experience that they are having with each other and that they are providing students. So giving them space and time by improving the tools that they have available to them, the systems and the processes, I think is really where my sort of attention sort of sits. And just finally, to sort of wrap that up, and just picking up on Keith's point, is I really don't think that we can lose sight or underestimate the level of requirement that we have to continue to improve our digital skills. We've got some great digital strategies and some really transformational programs about how we want to improve the experience for our people and our students. But we've got to take people on the journey with us and recognise that as humans, we've got a natural tendency to revert back to what we know. So if we want to make changes, if we want to improve the way that we communicate, the way that we work together, and the outcomes that we deliver, we've got to make sure that our skills and capabilities are running in parallel, and that we're investing time and energy in making sure that the change in how we want to work really lands and is embedded as the new normal, the new business as usual way that we work in an organisation.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, going back to old traditional ways. It's more at the point I find of frustration, or thinking when I can get the information I need as quickly as possible. And I think in a university setting, I've read somewhere that the amount of calls that come into the university during clearing and that period of clearing means that a university has to put on more resource, more people in the contact centre, or just get more people on the phones, because that's an area where, if you think about a customer, they've got biggest concerns. They're looking for an immediate answer. They're panicking and not necessarily looking to go via the digital channels of, all right, I'll post a message online or I'll send an email. It's picking up the phone, because their stress and anxiety are at that level. So how can we I suppose look at those things when it comes to communicating with our staff as well as with our customers at points where they think, actually, that's going to be a point where they will revert back, and we need to be prepared for that. Niall, is there anything you want to add in terms of what Keith and Jenny were saying there? Or
so I think that channel shift, I mean, you've mentioned it a couple of times already, but that channel shift is so important. And clearing is a perfect example for this. People are not going to want to engage on a AI-based chatbot when their potential futures at stake, especially given the financial contribution required nowadays. So understanding the right channel at the right time for both the person receiving that service, but also providing that service is critical to that. So I think that's the North Star that we all need to think about as we move up that value stack of channel shift. From a vendor point of view, rather than talk about, we're talking about a vendor as opposed to a leader looking at hybrid working within RingCentral. I would say that our priorities in supporting organisations are very much around shifting. So that Jenny mentioned resilience. This is a great example. So resilience, redundancy, risk. So it's about shifting and reducing, improving that resilience, redundancy, and reducing that risk. It's about supporting the strategy of the organisation that we're engaged with. So using the example of clearing again, this is about the right channel at the right time. And the last thing, I'm really vocal that, for me, the vendors should be inspiring and evangelizing the new ways of working. Now, that might not be in place now. It might not be in place in 2024 or 5. But I think it's our job to try to lead the market, to show people where they can be and should be looking at from a technology point of view. So from my 3 priorities, it's about shifting securely and easily. It's about supporting the organizations wanting to use communication. And then it's about inspiring or evangelizing the new ways of working.
Okay, what I'd like to come on is to one of those other questions that we try to collect from our respondents, which was asking them 500 ways in theory to name 3 things that can improve the experiences of management of a hybrid workforce or smarter working team or organization. And their responses aligned with effective technology, having the right technology for the right people at the right time, as well as leadership and culture, which, Jenny, I'm going to come to you on naturally, management and training, performance and standard, as well as equality and well-being. So what 3 areas or what 3 improvement areas does your organisation need to address to maintain a successful hybrid or smarter working environment? Jenny, I'll come to you first if I can.
Thanks, Mark.
Is it all
And
about the
yeah,
culture?
if I had the answer to that, I think what we've learned is that there are no easy answers to this. I think each organisation has been at a different starting point. I think absolutely leadership and culture, role modelling and behaviours are fundamental, and I think that will impact anything else that you put in that space. So I think having some clear business principles about what the organisation's value is, what its purpose is, and what the expectations are of how it will deliver its key outputs, I think is really important. But I also think it's important to give local ownership. So I haven't come across an organisation yet that I've worked with where there is a single approach to this. In the university environment, we are a campus-based organisation, but we have students that access their learning content online. We have students that access their learning content on campus, and the same for a lot of the roles that we have across the university. One of the things that I always advocate is being clear about what your business principles are in terms of how you work, but develop and I often call it a charter for how a particular directorate or department or function should operate. What are the key areas around people, place, and process or technology that you need to be clear about to have an effective hybrid working practice, and recognise that that's going to continually change. It's not always going to be the same, but giving people local ownership, giving them some flexibility, giving them the opportunity to establish preferences, what works, what doesn't in their space, I think is really important. And finally, I think we shouldn't underestimate. I think we're all clear, aren't we, about the technology opportunities and challenges, and around leadership and culture. I think probably an area, particularly in the public sector, that we've been catching up on is around our workplaces. So it looks like just today we're all clearly in different places, but we want the experience, no matter where we are, to be the same, so people can engage and can have the same opportunities to communicate. And I think making sure all of our spaces, whether they are people working at home, whether they're people working in the office or in a third space, needs to be of a similar quality, and that's probably where we need some further investment in order to be more confident in that space.
Keith, from local authorities' side, areas of improvement that can maintain this, I suppose, what we must see is a successful approach to hybrid working in local government. I read somewhere, was it the LGA, were they pushing or asked the question as to whether they can get all councillor meetings purely hybrid? Don't know if that's ever going to happen. It'd be an area of significant cost and efficiency savings if it can. I'm not sure how much reluctance they'll face there. I'm sure that'll be significant. But what areas in local authorities can we improve to maintain a successful hybrid working environment?
I think, as Jenny was saying, we talk about culture, don't we? Not quite sure when we're talking about it as different organisations or people within those organisations, that we're always talking about the same thing. But enabling people to be the best that they can be, whether that through digital training and development, whether that's through the kit that they've got at the right time, whether that is enabling a different group of people to consider becoming an elected member because they're not having to traipse into a town centre so often because they can do it remotely, as you've just been talking about, Mark. So enabling people to be the best that they can be, and also enabling people to have the confidence to know the best situation for them to complete a task, I think is really important. Are you working from home? Are you working in the office? What's the expectation? There's still a lot of confusion and uncertainty. There certainly is with ourselves. How much should I be in every Tuesday, or what pattern is it? A culture of, work is what we do and not where we do it. What is the best place and environment for me to complete a task? And that will be different with almost every task. And certainly today, I'm in the office, and we've been doing a workshop to discuss various things around the regeneration of Walsall as a borough. And the best way for us to do that was to actually to come together, to be able to brainstorm in that way that you can do face to face. I know there are technical ways of doing that, but for us at that time this morning, it was the best place for us to do. So it's enabling it and giving people the confidence to make that choice. I think the big improvement that we've got now, because of the hybrid space and the digital tools that are available to us, is that we can find out much more information about how our colleagues are performing, how they're feeling, what their requirements are to enable them to be the best that they can be. So listening to what our colleagues are saying to us, the information that we're getting from the way that they're working, enables us, and I don't mean this in a performance culture of sort of keeping an eye on exactly what they're doing when they're doing it, but the intelligence that comes back from the tools that we've got is greater than we've ever had before, much greater than everybody who's sitting in their offices or in a big open plan area. So let's use that effectively to inform how that culture evolves over time. Because I think what we've got now may work for now, but as Jenny was saying, we've got to continually review and refresh as technology changes, as the demands of the workplace changes. So let's use the intelligence that we now can get, but making sure we've got people who can interpret that and really make the most of it, because so much can come at us now that we don't always use the data that we've got in front of us effectively.
Do you see the financial difficulties that many local authorities are facing? There's talk of up to a £5 billion black hole in local government budgets. That's going to have an impact further down the line on how councils address. Jenny mentioned buildings. You think about bringing the staff back into the office, creating that workplace, those collaboration areas. Those things are going to fall down on the agenda perhaps when it comes to actually the resources of a council just to deliver basic services. Will resourcing and financial resourcing have an impact on smarter and hybrid working, do you think, in local government?
It's bound to. There are financial challenges, and every council around the country faces those every single year with the budget setting process that we go through. And we have to balance budget, and we have to provide value for money. So yes, it will be one of the number one influences going forward. But actually, working in different ways across the organisation, so we're not in the departmental silos that we may have been before, because we're working across the organisation enables us to do things more effectively and efficiently, breaking down some of the barriers with other organisations that we work alongside, whether that be a university or whether that be an NHS trust, because we can effectively work with systems between organisations to achieve something for the place. Just gives us opportunities to do things differently and more effectively. And that's not all about cutting workforce or saving money. It's about being more effective and more efficient at what we do, because technology enables us to collaborate and share information much more effectively than we ever had the opportunity to do before. And then, of course, you've got the basics. I mean, a lot of local authorities own lots of buildings. Do we need to own every building? What is the use of that building now in 2023? In 1993, it may have had an absolutely vital purpose, but does it now as our residents work, live differently? And so your public estate potentially doesn't need to be the same public estate as it was previously. And that public estate is partly a digital public estate now, rather than just a physical public estate.
Yeah. It's driven by the technology now. If you think about, on-prem legacy technology not enabling what councils need to do, the cost savings in migrating from on-prem to cloud, and maintaining that level of support to keep public sector attractive as a place to work, because it's a smarter working employer, and allows hybrid teams to flourish. What I want to do is quickly, because I'm conscious of time, is just move on to one of the most interesting areas of the survey that we touched on briefly. This whole role of AI. We asked our readers to list 3 areas in which AI could help them improve communications with their customers. And I read daily about the role of AI that's playing in communications and collaboration. and how that's impacting internal communications externally with customers. They talked about it improving availability, personalised experiences driven by AI, response times improving, especially in those critical areas when people want a response and not waiting for 5 minutes for a chatbot to load. Providing smarter, integrated, better analytics and reporting. And one of the interesting things I've seen recently is this bespoke content. Creating bespoke content, the AI is able to not necessarily take empathy out of it, but understand what the citizen is requiring and find that information. So 39% of respondents felt their organisation had a positive attitude to potentially adopting AI, but it would also suggest there's a lack of understanding about the benefits of AI, maybe at that amount, 39%. In what ways can your organisation, and indeed the sector in which your organisation's in, embrace AI in their communications? And at what point would you be seeing, or would you see this becoming standard practice for public sector? Keith, I'll start with you if I can.
Yeah, I think there are great opportunities through AI. There's no doubt about that, but there's also a considerable amount of fear, as there is with any new sort of technical revolution, if I refer to it as that. Fear for jobs, fear for skills, etc. At the moment, I think where I'm sitting, we've over the last few months, we've got some really clever people in to talk about it, talk about opportunities, and have that conversation in an open way. But there is still a lot of uncertainty about how exactly we're going to use it and what impact it will be on to the way people work currently. For me, as a communications director, personalisation, we know evidence-based information gives us this. We know that people engage with so much content out there. People engage with what's most relevant to them. So the more that we can personalise and make content bespoke for our residents, the more connection they feel with their local authority, the more connections they feel with what we provide as a range of services. So it's not just about whether we pick up the bin on time every week, on every Wednesday morning or not, but it's a range of things that we can provide, that we do provide, and that we build a relationship with those people as we develop the place going forward. So it's not us delivering it for them, it's delivering it with them. But the more and more personalized that we can be, whether it's through visuals, whether it's through areas of interest, topics, communities, etc., that AI I see as a great opportunity for us to give us the capacity to be able to provide that bespoke, personalized content that personally there's no prospect of me being able to do with the scale of the team that I've currently got. And because of what you talked about before, Mark, and the financial challenges that a local authority, most local authorities face, we're not going to double the size of our communications team anytime soon. So therefore, what can we use in terms of digital channels, digital technology to enable us to provide much richer content, which is much more relevant for the audience which we are serving. And I think AI gives us a great opportunity to do that.
Jenny, AI in further and higher education when it comes to communication channels, are students going to accept talking to a piece of AI over a contact agent?
And I think that's probably, I think the first point that I would make is that I really don't think that we should automate just because we can. It's absolutely about understanding what the user experience is and what we want it to be. Does it improve things? Does it provide a better experience, or is it just different? And so I think, given the limited funding that we have across the public sector, we've got to be really sure that we're investing in the right things for the right reasons, and actually that we are making life better for people and not just more complicated. And I think my final point around how do we do that, I think that we've got to, I think there are two key things for me. I think we've got to embrace simplicity. Whatever we do has to be simple, has to be easy and accessible, and it has to be able to be adopted by a whole range of different customers or students or citizens, whatever they are, in our respective organisations. But it also has to be intuitive, so it has to have some level of understanding for what that individual is trying to achieve and help them on that journey, so that they get to where they need to be more effectively, quicker, and with a better outcome. And I think we've got to be mindful of those things when we think about the amazing potential that we have, an opportunity around how we can utilize AI across how we communicate, engage, and deliver services.
You're absolutely right. I always put it down into my own personal settings. So, booking a hospital appointment or receiving a hospital letter for an appointment, I'm thinking, I'm married, I have children, I work. If they knew that information, they won't give me a hospital appointment at 3:00 on a Thursday when I'm involved in picking the kids up. Could a piece of AI inform them of that and actually suggest a time that's relevant for me? So how we can kind of introduce it. I like the mundane stuff. That's what it's there for. The AI can, help with mundane tasks, make things more cost effective, more efficient. But in terms of personalizing and making, in that setting, a healthcare setting, an appointment, and we've seen obviously from the news the huge backlog of NHS appointments, the amount of missed appointments, do not attends, is going higher and higher. And I think that AI could play a part in that. Stop giving me doctor's appointments and hospital appointments at 3:00 on a Thursday when I'm picking the kids up. Know that about. I'm happy to give you that data about me. I'm happy to tick some boxes that say I do this, I do this, I do this, and therefore make that customer journey better for me. If you can do that, great. I'll get off my soapbox there. Niall, I'm going to finish with you if I can. The technology, it's there, it's being developed. We've seen it, we're experiencing it in other areas. What do you think in terms of AI and the communication channels?
So I think there's a nice quote actually from Gartner recently that talks about significant hype in the market of AI, and it has absolutely the power to be transformative, but it's nascent, and so the services are still in trial modes. So it's absolutely the thing that's coming. I talk about evangelizing and innovating. For me, I think we're all in violent agreement here. AI is absolutely the way to support better automation. How many times have we all been on a chatbot where you type something in and we get gobbledygook back, or we just don't get the right answer and we get stuck in this circle, and guess what? We end up calling somebody. So AI, in its first instance, will absolutely support better automation. The impact that will have is that it will allow a more effective channel shift. So, we talk about the funding challenges in public sector at the moment. That is an absolutely, natural tick in the box to say we can be better automation, we can channel shift more effectively, provide better service, and then free up our agents to have the complex queries or maybe the vulnerable queries that need that voice channel face to face. And that's, to me, an absolute no-brainer place where AI is going to start.
Okay. What a nice way to finish our conversation. Jenny Baines, Keith Beech, Niall Carter, thank you very much for sharing your insights. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you all.